r/NoSleep. Posted by u/JJX. The trees come alive at night. They aren't friendly. Ah yes, trees. As you might be thinking, trees don't come alive. As any normal person would think, but I am afraid that you're wrong about that. My town is what you call weird, to say the least. Honestly, if I hadn't lived here for so long, I would agree with that statement. My name is Tommy. And this is one of my terrifying experiences I've dealt with while living here. I've been living here in this town since I was born, so about 16 years. Ever since I could remember at exactly 10 p.m. I could hear faint scratching on my window. At first I didn't think anything about it, until it started to get more violent as the nights progressed. Sometimes, I could hear faint whispers outside my window. But if I opened it, naught would be there except trees. As I walked downstairs toward the kitchen, my father and mother was already seated at the bright red dining table. I sat down in the middle and asked the question. "Mom. Dad. I have a question to ask you." Right before I could talk, the TV switched over to the news channel. A woman in a violent work suit and long curly brown hair. This just in. 17-year-old Casey Adams was reported missing 28 hours ago. The search for the missing teen went cold as his scent stopped at the entrance of the Caspian Forest. Casey is the fifth teen that has gone missing. More information of this story will continue after this commercial break. As we sat there in shock, my father grabbed his coat and hat and left the table. "Well, work's a calling and I can't be late. There's an important meeting I have to attend." With that, my father left and it was only my mother and I. As many questions rushed through my head. I wanted to know only one thing: why? Why was all of this happening? As my mother stood up from her seat, I didn't beat around the bush and blatantly asked her what was going on in the town. If having the color drained out of your face was a contest, my mother would have won. Her face was pale and expressionless. I don't know what scared me more. Her reaction to my question, or the thought of something scaring my mother that bad. She stood there for seemed like an eternity. Before leaving for work, she whispered into my ear. "I can't explain it to you right now, but please stay away from those woods. I promise I'll explain it to you one day when you're older." And just like my father, she left for work, leaving me home alone with my thoughts. The whole day I couldn't get everything out of my head. The woods, the missing teens, and the lies that my parents are telling me. I just wanted to know, why is everything happening? I should have listened to my mother. The day passed like usually, but I stayed in my room and thought about everything. I decided to explore the woods when my parents fell asleep to put my mind at ease. I couldn't take not finding out what my parents are hiding from me. As nighttime came, my parents strangely fell asleep earlier than usual, but I didn't care. If they weren't going to tell me what was going on, I'll just find out myself, and the answer has to be in those woods. I snuck out through my bedroom window and left it slightly cracked and headed toward the forest. The walk toward the forest was overwhelming, to say the least. I felt a strange feeling that I was being watched by something. The dark sky wasn't helping either. It was darker than usual. My only light sources were my flashlight and the dim light from the moon. As I approached the forest's entrance, the sign covered in moss and vines read out. Caspian Forest. Even reading it in my head gave me shivers down my spine. I pushed through the rusty gates and walked into the forest. As I walked deeper into the forest, the feeling of being watched grew larger the deeper I walked. With my flashlight leading my way, I stumbled upon a group of somewhat small trees. They had to be at least 6 feet and up. As I got closer toward the tree, a ripped piece of fabric from a plaid shirt. As I reached for the fabric, the tree branch whipped and recoiled away from me. I reached again, while this time, it whipped its small branch across my hand. I jumped back from in fear, not knowing my hand was cut. As the sound and feeling of movement circled around me, I looked around to see the other trees moving as well. They weren't just moving their branches, no, they were moving their whole bodies as they moved through the dirt and grass toward me. I started running in a panic. It was for long until I felt something coil around my left ankle and brought me down. My thoughts raced as the tree that grabbed me started pulling me toward it. The sounds of dirt moving also grew near. I tried pulling my ankle free, but it proved useless as it tightened its grip. I looked around frantically for something to free me from its tight grasps. I spotted a sharp rock and reached out for it and hacked at the branch like a madman until it loosened the grip. I felt the ground under me being to shake and shift violently as I stood up and began running. I stupidly looked back and was met with the image I couldn't forget. The trees still chasing me. I could see the big razor-sharp teeth. It felt like a dream. It had to be a dream. But yet, I knew it was all too real, all too dangerous. I had to get away from these trees or I would end up like the rest that failed to get away. I lost all sense of faith and felt I was going into the wrong direction. It didn't help that those things wanted to rip me apart and eat me. The exit gate was on the left side of the forest, right? All I knew was I had to put a gap between me and those trees if I wanted out of here. The more I ran, the darker it got. My flashlight helped me see what was in front of me. As I looked back, I saw that the trees were slowing down. Maybe they were getting tired. But they still kept chasing me. I couldn't describe what happened next even if I had the dictionary beside me. One of the trees, growing tired that they couldn't catch up, screamed a high hellish shriek. Even though I was somewhat far ahead, I covered my ears and it hurt like hell. What thing could scream that loud? As I ran, the ground underneath me started shaking more violently and a louder roar echoed through the night. As I saw a small ditch, I didn't waste any time before jumping into it and sighed with relief. Just for a moment I was safe. Or I thought. Multiple loud roars echoed out. Louder than the first. The dirt shifted and shook as the loud thumps became more frequent. As I peeked out of the ditch, what I saw still sent shivers down my spine. Giant trees began moving down the small hill they laid on. Another shivers ran down my spine as the movement picked up in my direction. I peeked once more to see the trees from earlier making their way toward me. With the adrenaline pumping, I picked myself and started running in the direction I came. The giant trees roaring louder, I felt and heard their giant steps chase after me. My foot slipped on a dead root. As I stumbled to get up, a branch reached out for me, but I managed to move out the way. I wanted to give in. I wanted to just accept my fate and get it over with. But for some reason my mind wanted to give in. My heart and body kept pushing me to run and escape. As the bigger trees slowly started gaining on me, I saw the trail. I ran harder and pushed myself harder. I could feel the small branches brush against my back as I leapt through the rusty gates. With my heart beating and pounding, I looked at the gates. 50 feet away was the trees. The sharp razor teeth chomped against each other as they went back into the forest. I wanted to pass out. I wanted to cry. But I couldn't do either. The sounds of shuffling slowly faded away and I was all alone. I should have listened to my mother and maybe I didn't have to learn it this way.